नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नंदनाय च नंदगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। ओम ज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनच्छलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति सुपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी शुभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वंश कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। ओम विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतलेश स्वामी नामिने नमः। ओम विष्णुपादाय कृष्ण पृष्ठाय भूतलेश भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती गौरवाणी प्रचारणे निर्विशेष निवाद पाश्चात्य मूकं करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारिणं परमानन्दमाधवं श्रीचैतन्य ईश्वरं। हरि ओम। Hare Krishna. So welcome back to our continuation of the discussion of the Srimad Bhagavat. Today we'll be discussing chapter 28 of Canto 4, which is entitled Puranjan becomes a woman in the next life. Very interesting name. Huh? We are still on the story of Puranjan, which is actually an allegorical story, which is being narrated by whom to whom? Anybody recollects? Who's narrating this story to whom? Test time.
Narada Muni.
Narada Muni is narrating.
Prachina Barsi.
Okay, thank you. If you had said anything else, I would have left the class. Because if after 3 weeks nobody can answer what am I talking about, then it will be disaster, right? So anyway, I'm just joking. So we are continuing the discussion. Prachina Bari was so attached to his version of religion, and his version of religion was that of dharma, artha, kama, which is what most people are trapped in. Trapped is because they believe they are very progressive, but actually they are simply using religion as a means to achieve artha and kama. That's what the Bhagavatam says. Dharma is not for the purpose of artha and kama. That may be a side effect of it. Yeah, of course. Artha and kama must be procured through dharma, but dharma is not for that purpose. Correct? It's not that the reverse is true. Isn't it? So just because something gives A and B doesn't mean that the thing exists for the purpose of A and B. Yeah, but those are side effects. That is true. Anyway, we've discussed that point already. So Narad Muni, being very kind on this descendant of Dhruva, wants to enlighten him His sons have already been enlightened, the Prachetas, by Lord Shiva to the Rudra Gita, and they are engaged in intense practice of this beautiful meditation on Lord Hari, instructed by one of the greatest of gurus, Lord Shankar. By the way, before I forget, happy Navaratri to all the devotees. May the blessings of Goddess Jagadamba be on all living entities. The external energy of the Lord is actually, in one sense, not different from the original spiritual energy. She is the shadow potency. The same mother who is manifested as Radharani in the spiritual world, her shadow potency manifests in the material world as Durga. So, we are always her children. So let us pray to her for her grace so that we may be protected materially and spiritually. And by her grace, we can come closer to Krishna. So, our obeisances to her lotus feet. So, coming back to the topic under discussion, the story is continuing, and now the story has come to a very interesting point. All this while in the story, we are discussing about Puranjana and how Puranjana was enjoying, and then finally he finds Puranjani, he gets excited, he marries her, and they're having a great time in the city of 9 gates. Then finally this enemy attacks Chandavega with the 360 Gandharvas and Gandharvis. And we analyzed, I'm not going to repeat all of that, but the sum and substance of that conversation was that the Narad Muni is trying to tell King Prachina Barishat that Chandavega, whose time will attack the Pura, the body of each and every living entity. Nobody is going to be spared. And even though initially he was resisting, finally he started becoming weak. And then we spoke about in the last class, the daughter of Chandavega, Kala Kanya, who's also known by the name of Jara or old age, and how she was sent. So she was looking for a suitable husband. She went everywhere. Nobody wanted to marry her because nobody wants to accept old age. And finally, she went to Narad Muni. Narad Muni said, sorry, excuse me. I'm not interested in this. I'm a brahmachari. So she became upset and he was cursed to not have any stable place to stay. Always have to travel. Narad Muni was very happy because that was more of a blessing than a curse for him. Because those who are fixed residents at one place, there's a strong tendency to get attached. The tendency to get attached is so strong in this material world that even after, and this is the words of great acharyas, this is not my opinion, these great saintly people have said, even after renouncing the whole world, it is possible that a renounced person may get attached to the tree under which he is sleeping. Radhanath Maharaj would jokingly sometimes speak about this. Actually, the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, sorry, I'm deviating from the topic, but not actually deviating, but I'm going to another story. I just want to emphasize this point. It's a very interesting point. The 6 Goswamis, it is said, just to be so careful that they don't get attached to anything, they would sleep under a different tree every day. Because what happens once we start sleeping in the same place every day, then after some time the sense comes, this is my place. Even though there is no booking, there is no purchase, this is my place. Why you are sitting? This is my regular place. This is my place. Correct? In cities, even beggars become attached. This is my begging place. Why this beggar is coming and sitting? This is my place to beg. So Gaurang Prabhu, His Grace Gaurang Prabhu, was from Chopati. He was telling a beautiful story once. I'm just repeating his story. And I know exactly what it means because I am from the same ashram and I know what happens there and how it would have manifested. So there also brahmacharis don't have a fixed place to sleep, which means you just go and you find some place. Because Maharaj wants devotees to not be so attached to their place of sleeping. So, of course, the common tendency is once you like one place to sleep, you will typically go and sleep there. And then, if you are a more senior devotee, then others will give deference to you and say, okay, this is your place. It's like an undeclared my place. So one day Gaurang Prabhu said, so there was already one place which had become his place in his mind. Gaurang Prabhu himself is telling this story, so I'm repeating. This is not my judgment of him. This is he narrating the story. So he said that, one day he was a bit late from one preaching program and he came and he finally got his bed. The temple room was dark. Everybody had already found their respective places to sleep. And he entered in that dark environment trying to find his place amongst all these sleeping people. Devotees would just put a mat on the floor and sleep and put a blanket over their body. Brahmacharis I'm talking about. We would sleep in a very simple way. When I was a brahmachari, just sleep on a mat. At most, put a mosquito net on top of us just to protect us from malaria. So, much to Gaurang Prabhu's, shocked, some devotee was sleeping where he was sleeping. So Gaurang Prabhu tells that he was very upset. He was already tired, it's already late. So, and he was not in a mood, as he said, to compromise and go and find some other place to sleep. So, he was like, hey, idhar kyun so raha hai? Why are you sleeping here? So nobody, nothing, there was no response. So Gaurang Prabhu was very persistent. He actually, wooed the person to wake them up. And he said, hey, who is it? Who's sleeping here? Then from under the blanket, sound came, Radhanath Swami. So I don't know why, for some strange reason, Maharaj had just chosen to sleep in the temple hall on a small mat. I mean, anyway, he sleeps on a mat only. But, he had chosen to sleep there, And Gaurang Prabhu was absolutely shocked that he had woken up his spiritual master trying to tell him, get out from here so that I can sleep. This is my place. And he was laughing, of course, he was narrating this in a laughing way, telling that, how we become so attached that this is my place. So the point that we are trying to say is that the tendency of the conditioned soul is to become so attached, even with a little bit of association. We are in this body for practically 60, 70, many of us maybe 30, 40, 50, 60 years. So imagine how attached we are to body and its byproducts. Few days we sleep somewhere or sit somewhere, also we become attached. So that is why one should be very, very careful. Even those who have renounced everything else can become attached to the sleeping place. Radharani Maharaj was once narrating a beautiful pastime. I don't want to go into that because that will be a long detour. But he was telling the pastime within the Leela of this great Acharya, Srila Ramanujacharya, where there's a very beautiful pastime where it was demonstrated how the brahmacharis had become attached to their own kaupin. Kaupin means their undergarments. So they were so proud of their renunciation, but they were attached to their undergarments. What in Hindi we call it langoti. So they would wash it because they would just wear a langoti and a simple outer cloth. So anyway, that was a very interesting pastime. But that is the point. So Puranjan also, as time was passing, as Chandavega had through his soldiers made that attack, and meanwhile Kala Kanya, the daughter of Chandavega, had already got married to Bhaya, fear, and she, together with Prajvara, was the, if I remember correctly, the brother of Chandavega. Prajvara means intense fever. And the Yavana army, the soldiers of Chandavega, they all together attacked the city of Puranjan. So they really started ravaging Puranjan city. All the Yavanas from all sides of the city attacked and started tearing the city apart. Essentially, what that means is various forms of diseases. The Yavanas represent here various forms of unclean habits and diseases. They would attack the body, and in that way, the body slowly started failing. Actually, nowadays, the kind of modern lifestyle we lead is actually so unhealthy. We don't even realize how actually we are destroying our bodies from inside. That's why a few days ago I posted that article. How 50s are the new 70s. At one time, 70, what people's health would be when they were in 70s, now the people's health is like that in 50s. Many professionals are dying in early 50s because of the kind of lifestyle they lead. Just 2 hours ago, one of my colleague friends is 52. He passed away in Dubai. Just got the news. And we're all shocked. And every few weeks, I hear about some friend passing away at a very early age. So externally, they seem to be in good health and this and that. And most of the times, it is an unexpected cardiac arrest. So we are not saying this to scare you, but the point is that material life is so unpredictable, and if you are not careful in terms of our lifestyle, the stress, especially prolonged stress that we expose ourselves to, our eating habits, our exercise habits, our other personal habits and hygiene, the quality of our relationships, if we don't focus on that, we are actually destroying ourselves from the inside. So even though medical science is progressing, we are destroying our health from inside. Anyway, so that's another point. But the body of Puranjan was ravaged, not the body, the city of Puranjan was ravaged, which essentially means that the body of the living entity is ravaged. And Puranjan was so attached to his body, to his city, which was full of all these kind of enjoyments, he was very disturbed. So I'm going to go through this fast. There are a lot of points mentioned here, and you can read those in details. But essentially what happened was that when the city was attacked, the city's main superintendent, we discussed, was the 5-hooded snake, which represents the prana. It is our prana which is protecting this body, isn't it? And that is why we say, when somebody dies, the prana left. Pran chale gaye. Because we don't say, that the person died. We may say the body died, but we don't say the person died. We say the person passed away, or the pranas passed away. So when the pranas pass, the soul passes with the prana. In fact, the Atman is supposed to be floating in the pranas. That's how it is described, the region of the heart. So the city was being protected by this 5-hooded snake. And that five-hooded snake was becoming weaker and weaker and weaker. Puranjan was becoming more and more anxious as the attack was getting more and more intense. And through the influence of the Skala Kanya, Jara, Puranjan was losing the taste for material sense enjoyment. Losing the taste, not in the sense that he was becoming detached, but as one grows old, one is not able to enjoy as much material objects. The desire is there, but you cannot enjoy. You have to eat a lot of nice food, but you eat a little bit more, or some things you cannot digest. And you can talk about any sense, whether it's the sense of the eyes, hearing, taste, or those who like to enjoy at a bodily physical level. There also the organs become weak, and one is not able to enjoy in the same way that one was able to enjoy when he was young. So his lusty desires were there, but he was not able to enjoy, and he was becoming more and more frustrated. But even with that, his mind never turned towards self-realization. This is very interesting. Some people think when I become old, I will become automatically interested in God. Sorry to inform you, nothing like this is going to happen. Unless you have cultivated some spiritual life in your early years, which will help you realize, and done some regular cultivation over time, in some form or the other, it is very, very unlikely. Because old age makes the body and senses weak. It doesn't cause desires to disappear. Please understand this. Of course, in one sense, the desires become weakened a bit, not so much because the desires go, but because the body doesn't support it. And the transformation of the body may kind of, to some extent, reduce it, but not, the desires are not going to go away. Imagine if the body was immediately young and fresh, all the desires will come back. It is just maybe temporarily covered. So as Kala Kanya was attacking like that, Prajvara, intense fire. Prajvara is said to be the fire at the time of death. He set the city on fire. The body of Puranjan was suffering from high temperature. And then Bhaya, fear, Prajvara's brother came in. This is what happens at the time of death. High fever, body is weak, and one is overcome with fear. Especially so for sinful souls. Those who are pious, sometimes you'll see that they pass away very peacefully because they know what to expect. They are not so attached like others. But for some people who are just terrified with the whole idea of death, these are especially those who are very, very materially attached. So as the whole city was on fire, this five-hooded snake, the pranas, they were aggrieved and they were suffering and being burned. Finally, the serpent decided, now I have to leave this city. I can no longer fight this battle. Just as a snake who's in a tree, and the tree is put on fire, comes out of the hollow and escapes and goes somewhere else. Similarly, the pranas, when this particular body becomes no longer sustainable along with the soul, the living entity leaves the body. So when all this was happening, and as his energy was being sapped, his throat becomes choked up and he begins to cry loudly. So what happens when death approaches for a man who's very attached? Of course, one is the fear of the unknown because one doesn't know what to expect after death. And that is one kind of fear. The other kind of fear is the imminent separation from all that one has worked for and all that is connected to oneself for the last so many decades. Right? We spoke about one gets attached to even a place that one sits within a few days. Correct. Even if you park your car regularly at some place, even if it is not your parking, somewhere on the road, somebody else comes and parks the car there. You say, no, this is my regular place to park. Why you park here today? And there is a big fight. It especially happens in the residential societies. This is my place. Why you park? I always park here. You ask him. I park here always. So if you have been in this body for decades, how much attached one will be to the body, everything that belongs to the body, all the relatives, the living entity suffers. Puranjan was just at the thought of separation from Puranjani, from his children, grandchildren, and all that he has enjoyed. He was just suffering. He was remembering, oh, how my wife was doing this for me, how she was doing this. It was so nice, like this, like that. Now what will happen? So he was lamenting, oh, my children, my family, when I go, how they will manage their life. Everybody thinks like that. We all think that everybody is dependent on us. But no matter who goes, everything continues. Nobody's work is blocked by somebody's leaving. In Marathi, in the Natya Sangeet, there was a song, Jana Palabhara Manatila Haya Haya Zata Adatila Karya Kunache Kaya. Means, for a few moments, people will say, oh, he has gone, he has gone. But actually, whose work gets stopped? Tomorrow morning, the sun will rise. Everybody else will also get up. They'll go to their work. So that song goes on like that. It is the reflection of a person that, why are people so excited about, or so overly melancholy about my imminent passing. This is what is going to happen. Few moments only everybody will do hi. This was not intended to criticize anybody, but I spoke about one of my close friends passing away, right? So in one of my colleagues' group, where this news was broken, for 5 minutes, everybody was doing hi. Hi means not hi. Hi means, oh no, alas, he passed away. And after 5 minutes, the topic changed to beer. This beer is nice. That beer, did you drink this? 5 minutes. 5 minutes. And I was kind of shocked, how quickly. So how soon we become irrelevant in this world? I guess people may feel for a little while, but instantly people think, okay, now what? Okay, I have to carry on. So on. This is the sad reality. And that is why it is said one should not take one's material life too seriously. Sometimes we think we are very important, we are very indispensable. I am so this thing is without me this. Of course, this doesn't mean we should be irresponsible, but we must understand, of course, we should do the best we can in our situation according to our duties and responsibilities. But everything goes on in this world according to a higher arrangement. And what is due to certain individuals will be arranged by higher forces, whether we are there or not there. It will come. We think ourselves, like some people say, that we consider ourselves more important than what we are. So Puranjana was thinking like that, oh, what will happen to them? So finally, fear overwhelmed him, Bhaya came. And as soon as the snake left the city, the whole city burned and collapsed. What does that mean? As soon as the pranas left, Puranjan finished. Dead. But the interesting thing the Bhagavatam mentions, even as he was being forced to leave the body, Puranjan was not able to remember his long lost friend, Avigyata, who was silently with him even before he came into this Navadwara Pura, the city of nine gates. Anybody remembers who that friend was? His name was Avigyata. Anybody remembers?
Super Soul Prabhuji.
Huh?
Super Soul Prabhuji.
Super soul, yes. The Paramatma. So actually, he should have remembered the Supreme Lord at the time of death, but he was busy thinking about wife, children. Because what one is attached to during one's life is what will come to one's mind at the time of death. It is natural for the heart and the mind to go. At the time of that, you cannot, open your phone and check, okay, what was I supposed to remember? Okay, I was supposed to remember Krishna. Okay. Step 1, step 2, checklist. You know, to automatically the heart will go in the direction of what one is attached. Because the pranas are in a state of disarray. The time of death is very intense. And just like it is being explained here, Prajvara is coming, the whole body is heating up, the pranas are leaving. It's is it a time where one can coolly think, okay, now what I should do? It's the whole body collapsing at the time of death. It's a time of utter chaos internally at both a physical and a psychological level. It's very difficult to, do anything other than that what is our natural attachment will come out and we will think about that. That's what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. Whatever state of mind you have cultivated for the maximum time throughout your life, that is what will come up at the time of death. So he totally forgot Avigyata and he was remembering wife, children, what will happen, this, that. And it is said, as the king was being dragged out of his city by the Yavanas, not only did he not remember his friend, the well-wisher, Avigyata, the super soul, as soon as he came out, he saw waiting for him so many so many animals, which the king had mercilessly slaughtered while he was a king and while he was performing various kinds of sacrifices. And all those animals were waiting there angrily with their horns, waiting to pierce his body, to settle their account with him, because he had caused so much violence to them. So this point we have already discussed earlier, so I'm not going to go through this again. I think you already remember that if sacrifice, the yajnas, the animal sacrifice is not performed properly, then one has to suffer the consequences of killing the animal. And in Kali Yuga, you can take it for granted that we cannot do it properly. So please don't do anything like this. It will simply be bad karma. The Shastras say that animal sacrifice is prohibited in Kali Yuga. So Puranjan, after he was thrown out of the city, he continued his suffering for a long time, because he was so attached to the whole situation. But something very interesting happened because at the time of death, this Puranjan, he was remembering his wife. As the Bhagavad Gita says, whatever state of mind one remembers at the time of death, one attains that state. Correct? Bharat Maharaj remembered a deer, he became a deer. So what happens if a man remembers his wife? He becomes a woman in the next life. If the woman remembers her husband, she will become a man in her next life. If you remember your dog at the time of death, please don't do like that. Your dog, your cat, your parrot, please avoid. That is why it is said one should not overly get attached to certain things because then they can actually. This is exactly what happened to Bharat Maharaj, right? He got overly attached to a deer and he thought of the deer as he was leaving the body. Not in a planned manner, but he became so attached that that's what came out of his mind, even though he had before that done so much spiritual cultivation. That's the power of material attachment. So Puranjan, alas, he was not able to remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his friend Avigyata, and he remembered his wife and all the loving ways and loving things how she would serve him, how she would feed him, how she would sometimes chastise him, how she would give him good advice. That is all that was going in his mind. And he died. And as he was remembering his wife and he quit his body, in this next life, he was born as a girl. But the good thing was that Puranjan was born in a wealthy, nice, royal family as the daughter of the king of Vidarbha. And her name, now no longer he, has become her. Her name was Vaidarbhi. Vaidarbhi. The daughter of the king of Vidarbha, Vaidarbhi. Does the name Vaidarbhi ring a bell to anybody? Does anybody know who else is referred to as Vaidarbhi? Anyone? Who else is referred to as Vaidarbhi? You all know Vidarbha, right? Vidarbha
Is
is
it
the.
is it Rukmini Devi?
Yes, it is. It is. Who's that? Prashant, is it? Yeah, Prashant, correct. Vaidarbhi, Rukmini Devi was the daughter of the king of Vidarbha. That is why she was known as Vaidarbhi. Thank you. That's the correct answer. Of course, this story has nothing to do with Rukmini Devi. This is just, she was called Vaidarbhi. Again, Vaidarbhi just means daughter of the king of Vidarbha. So she was born as a daughter and she was very beautiful. She grew up as a princess. And then there was a very powerful yet very pious and saintly king by the name of Malayadhwaja, who was very learned and he was very powerful. He had defeated many other kings. It is said that Vaidarbhi was married to this great king, Malayadhwaja. Now the explanation is Malayadhwaja represents a devotee. So in the next life, this Vaidarbhi, Puranjan, who had no devotee association in the previous life and just uselessly wasted his life, didn't remember the Lord and became born as Vaidarbhi, got in the next life the opportunity to associate with a devotee. Because only when one gets that association does one's real good fortune become awakened. Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Shastra Koe, Lava Matra, Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Siddhi Hoy. So Malayadhwaja and Vaidarbhi lived together. They were a very nice, wonderful couple. They were living very nicely, and Vaidarbhi was, very nicely devotionally trained by Maladhvaja. So Puranjan had become Vaidarbi, just so that you don't lose the plot. Puranjan became Vaidarbi, and because he got the association of Maladhvaja, rather than being attracted toward materialistic things, Vaidarbi was now getting attracted to spiritual things. And it is said she had one very beautiful daughter. Maladhvaj and Vaidarbi had a very beautiful daughter who had very beautiful black eyes. Asite Kshana was her name. And Shri represents attraction to serving Krishna. Which means that by associating with Maladhvaja devotee, the soul developed attraction to serve Krishna and developed and also gave birth to 9 sons. 7 younger sons. Not 9. Actually, what is explained in the commentaries is that the 7 sons represent 7 out of the 9 devotional processes. There is Navavidha Bhakti, right? Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnoho Smaranam Pada Sevanam Archanam Mandalam Dasyam Sakhyam Atmanivedanam. Out of these 9, 7 are aspects of sadhana, but Sakhyam and Atmanivedanam are very high attainments. Because Vaidarbi was at a more neophyte practicing level, in her life, the first 7 were manifested. The last 2 were not manifested yet. That is why 7 sons are mentioned. And then, of course, those descendants gave rise to more descendants, and the daughter gave rise to more descendants. I'm not going to go into all those details. Eventually, it is said Malayadhvaja, when the right time came, Malayadhvaja decided to retire because he was a very saintly king. Just like the other great kings of Bhagavatam, he said, okay, now enough, I'm going to the forest. I want to do tapasya. I want to focus on the real goal of life. So Malayadhvaja went to the forest. His very chaste and devoted wife, Vaidarbi, also followed him. It is said, just like the moonshine follows the moon at night, Jyotsneva Rajani Karam, being a very devoted wife, she also gave up home, children, and all the material enjoyments. So it is said one should be like that. One should be devoted to the service of the spiritual master. So here, Malayadhvaja represents the spiritual master. So Malayadhvaja went to a place known as Kulachala, and there he stayed and performed a lot of austerities. He would bathe in the rivers, Chandravasa, Tamraparni, Vatodaka, and live on very simple food. No matar paneer, and roti and naan and gulab jamun. All they would eat. And I really don't know how they manage. If I think about that also, I don't think I'll be able to do this. Just eat roots and fruits in the forest. Actually, we have become so conditioned living in a city life. So difficult for us to lead an austere life, the kind of life that our ancestors would live. And because of that, the body usually becomes, because there's practically no grains, because they don't grow grains there. No, they're just doing their austerities. They're just living on fruits. Imagine a diet of only roots and fruits. Eventually, you become very emaciated. Of course, spiritually, you become effulgent. Physically, you become emaciated. But even Vaidarbi continued to support Malayadhvaja in performing these austerities throughout, no matter whether it was heat or rain or whatever the weather. Malayadhvaja was so focused in his austerity, it is said his mind was fixed on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and as he would be fixed, the wife would make sure that everything is done and nicely taken care of. For 100 celestial years, he remained fixed in his rati, his attachment to Vasudeva. That is what Narad Muni mentions. And he attained finally perfect transcendental knowledge of understanding the Supreme Lord, himself, and the relationship with him. Bhagavad attained the supreme perfection of life. And he understood that he, as the spirit soul, is totally different from matter. Now, there are a lot of beautiful points. I'm not going through everything. Otherwise, again, we cannot complete. So please read the Bhagavatam and the purports. So Malayadhwaj was being served also in a very austere way by Vaidarbi. And one day, as Malayadhwaj was meditating on the Supreme Lord, he left his body and he attained the transcendental realm. He was seated in his meditative posture, and the wife didn't even know that he has left. At one point, while serving him, and she touched his lotus feet, she felt that they were very cold, and then she realized that he has passed away. Then she became, for some time, very overwhelmed with misery and pain and lamentation. Because, husband, wife came to the forest. They were not staying like next to the supermarket, big bank balance, everything is taken care of. Now she has to live alone and manage everything. So she was quite worried that now I'm a widow and I'm alone in the forest, and she was crying very loudly and appealing to her husband, please wake up, don't leave me like this alone. You have to protect me from the thieves and the rogues. She fell down lamenting at the feet of her dead husband. Then finally she decided that no point for me living like this. My husband is also dead. I am alone. I am already in the forest. So she prepared a funeral pyre, light the body of her husband, and then she decided to also enter that fire together with her husband and give up her own life voluntarily. So as this was happening and she was planning to do like this, one Brahmana arrived there. Now this Brahmana came and approached her, and he said to her, oh, I am actually an old friend of King Puranjana. Who's King Puranjana? This same lady, Vaidarbi, was actually Puranjana in her last life. I am an old friend of King Puranjana. So, of course, in the history, Puranjana must have been mentioned. So he says, I am an old friend of King Puranjana. And I have come here, and then he starts pacifying the queen with his sweet words. Who is this Brahman? This Brahman is none other than Avigyata, the super soul, the Paramatma, who previously, in the previous life, Puranjana had so outrightly neglected that he failed to remember the Lord at the time of death. But the Lord continued to accompany him into his next life. And then when he became devotionally inclined and started cultivating, at the right time, a Vigyata comes in front of him and starts giving him good advice. So she asked, who are you? He asked, the Avigyata asked her, oh, who are you? Who is this man lying here? Why are you lamenting him? Don't you recognize me, who I am? And then this Avigyata reveals to her who he is. And he tells her, because she's not able to remember, he tells her, please understand, You are the same person who was Puranjan in the last life. Huh? And I was your friend that time, but you didn't bother about me. But I am here always to help you. I never leave you. We are just like two swans who are living together in the Manasa lake, the lake of the heart. Correct? He said in the heart there is the Atma and the Paramatma. We are like two swans. Even though we are actually very close, we are actually very far away from our original home, which is in the spiritual world. But leaving me because of your Gramya Mati, your materialistic consciousness, you went to this earth. You entered this material body, this Navadvara Pura, which was produced by another from the body of a woman. And you tried to enjoy and fulfill your material desires in this material world. But you have not achieved any happiness, even though you have been trying to do that for so many lifetimes. Actually, please understand, O Queen, you're not even Vaidarbhi. Even Vaidarbhi is not your real identity. Don't lament. Nor is your real identity Puranjan. So you can say, oh, I'm not Vaidarbhi, I'm actually Puranjan because I was Puranjan. No, that was also not your real identity. By my Maya, all these false identities are created just to facilitate those entities who want to forget me and enjoy materially. So don't be bewildered by these identities. Actually, you are my part and parcel. You are a spiritual spark. You are eternally my part and parcel. You are a part of me. Mamaivaamsho jivaloke jiva bhuta sanatana. Manashashtani indriyani prakritistani karshati. The Lord says this in the Gita, that the living entity is suffering because even though he's a part and parcel of me, he has forgotten his relationship with me and tries to enjoy matter. So qualitatively, we are the same. Quantitatively, we are different because I am eternal and, I am unlimited and infallible. Of course, both are eternal, but I am unlimited and I'm never overcome by Maya. So I'm infallible. I'm Achyuta. I never become overwhelmed. You become overwhelmed. So in this way, when Vaidarbhi was instructed, the spiritual intelligence of Puranjan started to become properly awakened. Narad Muni is narrating this. He says, in this way, when one swan was instructed by another swan, one swan is the Paramatma, the other swan is the Atma. Narad Muni is telling, when one swan was instructed by the other swan, O King Prachina Barhi, this Vaidarbhi, who was previously Puranjan in her last life, slowly became awakened to the reality of who they themselves are. I don't want to say he or she because both are irrelevant. The soul is neither a male or female in the sense that it is beyond any bodily identification. So the forgetfulness which was there because of the aversion to the Lord was replaced by remembrance of the Lord. And in that way, the soul of Vaidarbhi was reawakened. At this point, Prachina Bari, who's listening to this fascinating story all this while, wow, Puranjan, that city attacked, tried to fight, but finally fell and died, and the snake left, and he was dragged out of the city. Then he was pierced by these horns, and he finally died and suffered, and then he became Vaidarbhi. And then he married Malayadwaja, and such a wonderful thing. That time he was so pious and spiritual and this, and served her husband so nicely. And finally the husband died. Finally this friend came and this, oh wow, such a wonderful story. But still, Prachina Barhi has not realized what is going on. Even though previously in a previous chapter, Narad Muni had given a hint, remember? He had given a hint to Prachina Bari where he had said, just like you, this Puranjan was very attached and was performing a lot of rituals. But he still didn't quite get it. So now Narad Muni tells him that in this way, O Prachina Bari, I have given spiritual instructions to you through this allegory. Why I did like this? Because the Lord can also be understood indirectly. Paroksha Priyo, the Lord is referred to as Paroksha Priyo, means that he is fond of indirect expression. Can be known indirectly. So, because direct path would not have worked for you, I have used an indirect path, and that is also approved by the Lord. And he doesn't, he likes to be referred to in that way. Of course, one of the reasons the Lord is also referred to indirectly, there are many reasons, but one of the reasons is because for living entities like us who have no experience of the transcendental reality, we can try to understand something only by some material examples. And that's very difficult, right? How can we relate to something which we have no experience of? Because in our memory, we only have experience of matter and living in the material life. And that brings us to the end of chapter 28. And in chapter 28, in chapter 29, the next chapter is where, and finally, clearly, Narad Muni says this is an allegorical example. Then Prachina Bari starts scratching his head. Oh, so what was the message? Go back to the story. Go back. This, that, this character, that character. You know, what was the? Because he was sincerely trying to understand. He was sincerely, because he had surrendered to Narad Muni and said, "You instruct me, right?" So he was sincerely trying to understand. So Narad Muni in the next chapter gives him a debrief to try to explain to him what are all these characters, what is the meaning, and what is what. Much of which we have already discussed as we went through the story. But nonetheless, we will go through that chapter quickly because it takes to the logical conclusion. It's not just about that, but the story goes beyond that. What happened after words with Prachina Bari? So it's actually a very long chapter, around 82 shlokas, chapter 29. So we'll discuss this next time. So thank you very much. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai Shri Prabhupada. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
Yes, sir.
I have one question, but not sure whether it makes sense. Narada Muni is giving example of Puranjana, right? And even though you said it's an allegory, right? But you're saying that he has rejected the Lord at the time of death, but still Lord in the next life gave husband as a devotee. So doesn't it contrary, Prabhuji? Because as per Bhagavad Gita, I am just asking, trying to understand.
No, because he had some dharmic intelligence, even though he was deluded. Remember, Puranjani was his dharmic intelligence. So initially he became sinful. Then he restored himself to dharmic intelligence. So even though he didn't quite become spiritual, he was given that opportunity. Of course, here in this story, it is not explained what exactly was the cause of his good fortune. But the key point is, we can even think of it as a causeless mercy of the Lord, because it is not very explicitly mentioned. But the point that the pastime is trying to mention is that the transition happened when he had the association of Malayadvaja, whether we had the association of Malayadvaja. So that is the factor. So sometimes there are two ways by which a living entity may be turned towards spirituality. One is that he has the previous sukruti, and that previous sukruti or previous practice just comes back to the fore in the next life. Yes. That happens for many. So for example, whatever you have done now in the next life, in the right circumstances come, you suddenly remember and become attracted to the spiritual principles. If at all, do not complete your or perfect your Krishna consciousness this life. But for others who have not been in Krishna consciousness, when an empowered devotee of the Lord goes out of the way to give his blessings to some particular individual, then their good fortune can be created by that blessing also. Sometimes there may be some elements of causeless mercy. And that is why the devotees are the agents of the Lord's causeless mercy, because the devotees are given the freedom by the Lord to say, you give whoever you want to give. So both these elements are possible. Of course, here it is not mentioned very specifically, but perhaps it could be because of that. Either it could be causeless mercy or because there was some potentially some agyata sukruti performed in previous life. When one performs agyata sukruti over many lifetimes, eventually one comes to the point of developing some faith. And that attracts into one's life the opportunity to associate with devotees. And when one accepts that opportunity, one starts making serious progress. Okay. Does it help?
Yeah, Prabhuji, one more generic question. Like when someone passes, right, we have the habit. I was seeing one of WhatsApp video. So they asked him like we should not use rest in peace. What is the actual condolence message we need to use as per Parampara, Prabhuji?
We pray for Sadgati for the soul.
Okay.
So for those who are devotees, we pray that, because there is nothing like rest in peace. Because the concept in some of these other religions is you're resting in the grave. The rest in peace means you rest in the grave until the judgment day comes, and then you are called after a few thousand years. So, I mean, we are very clear that the living entity continues and goes elsewhere. Right? So there is a gati. Gati means destination. So the question for us, because we know what can happen after death, our hope and prayer is that it is Sadgati. Sadgati means a gati which is spiritually progressive. And one should at least go higher, if not all the way high up to the spiritual world, at least go higher. Sadgati. So for devotees, of course, we pray that, we hope and pray that they receive shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord. But for the other wider, well, we can say that, we pray that they achieve Sadgati. Or we can just, nowadays many people just say Om Shanti. But I think the idea of Sadgati is a more appropriate way to say, pray for the Sadgati of the soul. So the least that should happen is at least the soul is not trapped, and at least is progressive to go towards this next destination. Because sometimes it happens if a living entity is too attached or too sinful, then they hover around like a ghost. And then so many things have to be done to liberate that soul.
Yeah. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
One of my deceased relatives came in my dream and he showed me how he's trapped. And he said, you help me do something. So it happens if you are not careful, or if the processes are not properly followed, living entities may get trapped. the gati is not achieved. Actually, the whole science of going upwards is a very detailed science, and that's why all this Shraddha ceremony and all these things are actually very important. We take it very lightly. All these things are very important, especially for those who are not very advanced. Sridharji is saying Sadgati Prapti Rastu. Yeah, that also we can say. It depends. But anyway, so the point is, yeah. So that's why it's a good thing to observe all these rituals, Shraddha, Tarpan, yearly offering of oblations to the ancestors during Pitru Paksha. Please do all this. These are helpful. These are not against the principles of religion. Advaita Acharya would himself do it. Who's Advaita Acharya? Lord Chaitanya's associate, who is incarnation of Mahavishnu. When Dashrath Maharaj passed away, Lord Ramchandra did the Shraddha in near Nasik at Trambakeshwar. There's a Ram Kund there. Next to the Ram Kund, there's a place where Ramchandra sat and performed the Shraddha ceremony for his father Dashrath. When he found out that Dashrath had passed away, he was already in Vanvas, no? At that time. So after this relative of mine, he came into my dream and said like that, I went to that same place, exactly sat where Lord Ramchandra had sat, the same place next to that Ramkund, and performed that ritual to help, the diseased soul. Of course, I did a few other things also. But these are important things. These are actual factual things. These are not all imaginary things. So Sadgati is important. Not everybody automatically gets a good gati. And especially in Kali Yuga, it's a big thing. So it is our duty to our family, material duty. It's a duty nonetheless to our family, to our ancestors, to help them if they are trapped. That is our duty. So that's the concept. But for the wider community, of course, that is how we can pray. Okay? I hope it threw some light on the point. Yeah. Okay, any other point, any other questions? Okay, if there's nothing else, then we can end here. Tantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. So we will see you on actually good point. I remember this Wednesday. Okay, let me tell you. I told you we would be regularized from this Wednesday, but give me a day. Let me check the calendar and I will advise you. But we will have our class either Wednesday or Thursday. I hope that is okay with all of you. Okay, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Samveda Gaurava.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everyone. Hare
Thank you. Hare
Bol.
Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Swatiji. Thank you. Thank you, Siniji, Santanam, Rita ji. Sapna ji, nice to see you. Bhaskar, Hare Bol. Hare, nice to. Your face is dark though. There is no effulgence from the front.
Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Sridhar ji, hope all is well. Good. Prashant, nice to see you.
Hare Bol. Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Thank you. Thank you, Anand Sundari Mataji, Sachi Prema Mataji, and Shete Auntie. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Hare Krishna.